Hello and welcome. This is a practical guide to preparing for the Certified Information Systems Auditor exam. The focus here is simple: understanding, not memorization. Because the exam is not testing whether you know IT. It's testing whether you can think like an auditor. That means understanding risk, control, and governance, and applying that thinking in real-world scenarios. In this video, we'll break down a clear, structured approach to help you do exactly that. Let's start with what the CISA exam is actually testing. It is not asking, "Do you know IT?" Instead, it's asking something much more important. Do you understand risk, control, and governance? And can you apply that understanding in context? Because in the exam, it's not about recalling information. It's about interpreting a situation and choosing the best course of action from an auditor's perspective. Next, let's look at the core resources you should be using. Top scorers tend to focus on just a few key materials. First, the official CISA Review Manual. This is your primary source, and it aligns closely with how the exam is structured. But more importantly, the questions, answers, and explanations database, often referred to as the QAE. This is where you really learn how the exam works. It helps you understand a CISA-style wording, how to choose the best answer, not just a correct one, and recognize patterns across questions. You can then supplement this with YouTube breakdowns and flashcards for areas where you need reinforcement. You can also make use of supplementary material, but this should not replace your core resources. A popular option is the all-in-one CISA review guide by Hemong Doshi, or a similar simplified guide. These are useful because they break down complex concepts and make them easier to understand compared to the CISA manual. However, use these only if you find the official review manual too heavy or difficult to work through. They are there to support your understanding, not to replace the primary material. Now let's look at the main study method. The recommended approach is simple. 70% of your time should be spent on practice questions, and 30% on reading. That might feel counterintuitive at first, but there's a reason for it. Because the CISA exam is not testing how much you know. It's testing how you think. And the only way to develop that thinking is through consistent exposure to exam-style questions. Everything in this exam comes down to how you think. Not as a technician, but as an auditor. Governance always comes first, before any technical detail. You're not there to fix the problem. You're there to evaluate whether the right structures are in place. Think in terms of prevention, not detection. Stopping issues before they occur will almost always be the better answer. Keep your focus on business objectives, not just improving IT efficiency. And when analyzing a situation, go beyond the surface. Look for the root cause, not just the symptom. Because this shift in thinking is often the difference between passing and failing. When you're in the exam, having knowledge is not enough. You need a structured way to approach every question. Start by identifying the keyword. Look for terms like first, best, most, or primary. Then determine the context. Are you dealing with audit, governance, or operations? From there, apply the hierarchy. Governance, then risk, then control, and only then technical. Next, eliminate the weaker options. Anything too technical, too narrow, or not risk-based can usually be ruled out. That leaves you with the strongest choice. And finally, choose the most strategic answer. Not just what works, but what works best from an auditor's perspective. Look for answers that have the broadest business impact, are preventive rather than detective, address the root cause, align with governance, and occur as early as possible in the life cycle. This is where many candidates lose marks. Not because they don't know the content, but because they fall into common traps. One of the biggest is selecting an answer that is technically correct, but not the best answer in the context of the question. Another is jumping straight into fixing the problem, instead of assessing it first. You'll also see options that push you toward immediate implementation, when the better answer is to step back and evaluate. And very often, candidates ignore the business context entirely, focusing only on the technical detail. The exam is designed to test your judgment. So always pause and ask yourself, am I thinking like an auditor or like a technician? To study effectively, you also need to understand how the exam is structured across the domains. Each domain has a different focus, and knowing where to place your attention makes a big difference. Domain 1 focuses on the audit process, including evidence and independence. Domain 2 shifts into governance, with a strong emphasis on COBIT and overall strategy. Domain 3 is critical. This is where the system development lifecycle comes in. It's heavily tested, and often where candidates struggle. Domain 4 covers operations, including incident management and disaster recovery. And finally, Domain 5 focuses on security controls. So as you study, don't treat all domains equally. Be especially strong in areas like governance and the lifecycle thinking in Domain 3. Now, let's simplify COBIT. This is a very important framework in the exam, but you don't need to memorize every single process. What you do need is to understand how it's structured. At a high level, COBIT is about governance and management of IT. It starts with governance. That's EDM, evaluate, direct, and monitor. Then moves into planning. Through APO, align, plan, and organize. From there, you get into build and change, which is BAI, and this links heavily to Domain 3. Then operations. Through DSS, deliver, service, and support. And finally, monitoring. Through MEA, monitor, evaluate, and assess. If you understand this flow, you'll be able to interpret many of the questions correctly. Because COBIT is not just theory. It's the lens through which governance and control are assessed. One of the most effective ways to reinforce your understanding is to actively connect the concepts. Instead of just reading, start creating your own notes or simple tables. Map concepts to risks, risks to controls, and then link those controls back to COBIT. This is high-value learning. It forces you to think, and that's exactly what the exam requires. And this is often what separates a pass from a high score. As you do this, make sure you're comfortable with the key areas. Focus on the audit process and evidence, understanding the relationship between risk and control, and the core IT governance concepts. Also spend time on change management, access controls, and business continuity, including disaster recovery. If you can connect these areas clearly, you'll be in a very strong position for the exam. Another useful way to strengthen your understanding is through video learning. Sometimes, a concept just clicks better when you see it explained visually. Videos can help simplify complex topics and show how they apply in real-world scenarios. They're also great for reinforcing memory and building that scenario-based thinking the exam requires. And often, they bring clarity to concepts that feel abstract when you're just reading. So use video as a support tool to deepen your understanding, not replace your core study approach. As you get closer to the exam, mock exams become essential. This is where everything comes together. They help you simulate real exam pressure, so you're not caught off guard on the day. They also build your time management, which is critical. You need to be comfortable working through questions efficiently, without rushing your thinking. Mock exams will also highlight your weaker areas, so you know exactly where to focus your final revision. And as a guideline, aim for consistent scores between 75 and 80% before you sit the exam. That's usually a good indicator that you're ready. Before you go into the exam, it's worth being aware of the most common mistakes. One of the biggest is relying on memorization alone, without truly understanding the concepts. Another is focusing only on the correct answers, and not taking the time to understand why the other options are wrong. Skipping life cycle thinking, especially in Domain 3, is another area where candidates lose marks. There's also a tendency to focus too heavily on technical detail, instead of looking at governance, risk, and control. And finally, not practicing enough questions. This exam is built around application and judgment, and that only develops through practice. Avoid these mistakes, and you significantly improve your chances of success. At this point, you can start to recognize when you're ready. It's when you stop searching for the right answer and start identifying the best one. When you move away from memorizing and begin thinking like an auditor. That's where the shift happens. Success in this exam comes from consistency, from recognizing patterns, and from truly understanding the mindset behind the questions. And ultimately, it comes down to this: master the thinking, and the exam will follow. Before we wrap up, just a quick note on this content. This is part of my personal learning journey, based on my current understanding and experience in the field. I'm always open to input, discussion, and different perspectives. That's how we all improve. I'm not representing any organization here. These are my own views and interpretations. And if you find this material useful, you're absolutely welcome to use it as part of your own learning as well.